Story time about my toxic ex-best friend. So a little background information. I had a very close guy friend who we're gonna call Max. Now, Max was 2 years older than me, but due to our families being super close, him and I became best friends. Growing up, I saw him as kind of an older brother. And then eventually, as we grew up, I saw him as my best friend. Until I realized that he was actually a terrible person. And I missed all of the signs that he was not a real friend. Like one, our first fight, I told him something that I didn't want anybody else knowing. And what do you know, right after I tell him, my family knows, his family knows, my crush knows, all of our friends know. After this, I probably should have distanced myself, but he apologized and we became friends again. That was sign number one. Sign number two, his huge change in attitude. 1 second, he would be extremely rude to me, and then he would be this really sweet and caring guy, and his apologies were the best. So it was really hard not to forgive him. He was like a master manipulator. Number three, we only talked whenever it was convenient for him. Like seriously, we would never talk unless he needed something, like for part two. Part two about my toxic ex-best friend. I think we left off on sign number three, which was the only time that we would talk was when it was convenient for him. He would never reach out, which left me being the one who was constantly trying to preserve our friendship or whatever was left of it. Like all of our messages were literally me, and it made me seem really needy and like I was putting in way too much effort because he would literally answer with the most simple messages. Like, yeah, okay. Sure. And he would only talk to me whenever he wasn't with his friends. Sign number four. It felt like he was embarrassed of me. Now, I know that I was 2 years younger than him, but we were still friends, and I really don't think that's that much of a difference. Like, he would never want to be seen with me. The last sign, he would literally always talk about me behind my back. And I thought this was just rumors at first, until finally several people told me that it was not a rumor. He would say things like, oh, she's ugly, she's so immature, she's annoying and childish, she's so annoying. And then I finally decided to cut him off. Because if the bad outweighed the good, was it really worth keeping that person in my life?
Am I an asshole for lying to my boyfriend about being pregnant just to keep him in a relationship? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 5 years. Granted, we did break up throughout those 5 years. With all the breakups, we've actually been together for about 3 years. I've never considered myself an obsessive person, but when it comes to him, something just takes over me. Here's some of the reasons why we broke up. At first, he didn't want to be in a relationship even though I begged him, which I know was so dumb of me. So he eventually broke up with me and told me that he didn't want anything serious. But he kept on calling me every single week because he wanted the dirty. Instead, I started going out on other dates and I would flaunt it all over my social media. And this worked. It made him super jealous and he came right back to me. Called me up one day and told me that he wanted me back. The second time we broke up, I caught him talking to some girls on Facebook. When I confronted him, he broke up with me. Told me I was too nosy and that he needed to live his life as a single man. We finally got back together. I told him that it was for marriage. He said yes, that he would eventually ask me to marry him. A few months ago, he started acting really cold towards me. He would barely call me, and when we were together, he would never touch me. That's when I started digging in his phone and I found that he was talking to some girls on Instagram. But I knew that if I confronted him, I would risk him breaking up with me again. So I did the next logical thing. I waited until I saw him again and I told him that I was pregnant. I even started to cry to make him feel like I was happy. His face turned completely white and he asked me if I was sure. I said yes. Aren't you happy, baby? Part two is up. Am I the asshole for lying to my boyfriend about being pregnant just so that I could keep him in a relationship? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. That's when he started to cry. Remember, I don't even have a pregnancy test to show or anything, but surprisingly, he didn't ask for proof of my pregnancy. He just kept crying on the couch. I asked him if he was happy, but clearly he was not. But he lied and said, yeah, of course I'm happy. Seeing how vulnerable he was, I took advantage of the situation and I brought up marriage. I told him we should get engaged soon so that we could tell his family. Then he said, are you sure you want to get married? And I said, of course, we're gonna have a baby. Then he sat there for a minute and thought about it. Finally, he got down on one knee and said, do you want to marry me? I said yes! And this time I cried for real. All my dreams were coming true. After that, things started moving really fast. We invited both our families to my apartment and we hosted a dinner. We broke the news to them that I was pregnant. Again, nobody asked for proof of the pregnancy though. Our families were so happy and excited. That very same night, he gave me a beautiful engagement ring. His mom even started planning the baby shower. Let me remind you, I'm actually not pregnant. So I had to come up with a plan. You'll never guess what I did. Part three is up. Am I an asshole for lying to my boyfriend about being pregnant just to keep him in a relationship? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent me on Instagram. His mom started planning the baby shower and there was no turning back. Even my mom got involved in the planning of the baby shower. So like I said, I'm really not pregnant at this point. So I started trying to get pregnant, but my damn boyfriend just wouldn't touch me. I decided to check his phone again and saw that he was still talking to some girls on Instagram. So I decided to confront him at this point. I mean, we are engaged and I'm supposedly pregnant with his baby. I confronted him and he just got angry at me. He said that if he was going to marry me and have a baby with me, he would need to talk to other girls and that was not a negotiation for him. Then he confessed that he was seeing 2 other girls on the side and that there was no way he was going to stop seeing them and that I couldn't do anything about it. But his confession actually made me fall out of love with him. Now I'm planning to break up with him. But what do I do about the fake pregnancy? I do want to make him pay for what he said to me, but I don't want to hurt our families either. Should I just come clean? What should I do?
Story time about why I will never go on a date ever again. So a little background information. I was 20 years old and I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship. Now, I had just gotten out of this relationship like a month before I went on this date. And I had absolutely no intentions of looking for a guy, but I was up for, flirting with them and going on some dates. Well, the one day I am at the gym in my apartment building. And there's this guy who's walking on the treadmill next to me. And I get off and he gets off at the same time and he starts up a conversation with me. And we had started talking about how I never went jet skiing. And he was like, oh, well, do you want to go jet skiing on Tuesday? So I just decided to put myself out there. I said yes, and bam, we had a date the next day. So I meet him at his car, and we go on this date. He did end up paying, which was very nice. But anyways, we're on the jet ski, and we're in the middle of the water. I was kind of weirded out because I didn't think that we would have to be that close with each other. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never go on a date ever again. So like I said, he takes us to the beach, we get on the jet ski, and it's just 2 of us on one jet ski, which I was low-key uncomfortable about because I thought that we were each going to get our own, so there would be no touching involved. And after the shit that he pulled, I definitely wish that I had my own jet ski. So apparently he's jet skied all of his life, he knew how to do this. Well, we go pretty far out from land because he knew the people and he didn't have to listen to any of the rules. He offered to let me drive it, but I did not want to because of the fact that he was going super fast and I did not want to do that shit. Well, listen to this. He flips us off the jet ski, right? And when he does that, all of a sudden it hits me. I am in the middle of the ocean. Like there's sharks, there's other things, there's creepy things, mysterious things we don't even know about. I literally start crying and he thinks it's funny. He gets on the jet ski and literally drives away. I'm not even joking. He left me there for 3 minutes. I could barely see land. And then he ended up coming back and he was like, ha ha ha, da da da. I never saw him.
Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's send me on Instagram. I'm so sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, yeah, you could have been. I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. There were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly, felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, I immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying, which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me. He said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy busy at the restaurant that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding. And he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it, I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Claimers to know my story time is sending me on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding, and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. And he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. I kind of want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do?
Story time about my worst trip off LSD. So one of the kids in my friend group was about to leave for Arizona, and we would always talk about how we need to trip together before he leaves. And anytime that I would trip off acid, I would go to my one plug. Well, he ran out, so we had to go to somebody else. And I've never tried this kid's stuff before, but I just said fuck it, YOLO, which should not have been my motto at the time. But it was. So that night, we're in the car, and one of our friends is driving because he's sober, obviously. And before I put the tab on my tongue, I started to get really nervous. And I have never felt like that before I've taken acid. But I kind of just said fuck it, and I put it on my tongue. So we go pick up 2 more people that I'm not really close with. So then we make our way over to our other friend's apartment. And I'm kind of feeling it, but not really. But then as soon as we walk into that apartment, I start tripping balls. And you know, everything was going good. But then my dumb ass decided to look in the fucking mirror. And as soon as I look in the mirror, I see myself smile back at me, like for part 2. Okay, part 2. So like I said, I look in the mirror and I see myself smiling back at me. And that's whenever everything went south so quick. I sat on the bed, tried to pull myself together because I didn't want to make a fucking scene in front of everybody. But then I got caught in this fucking loop. And if you don't know what the loop is, then I'm going to tell you what it is. It's basically where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I started looking around at everybody and it looked like their faces were melting. One of my friends got up off his chair, walked to the other side of the room, and I watched him do that. But when I looked back over at the fucking chair, he was still sitting there. So I looked at my one friend that was sober, who I was actually really close with, and I think he saw the look in my eye and he was like, do you want to leave now? And I just shook my head, yeah, like I could not deal with that shit anymore. So we go to his car and then we drive to my boyfriend's house. Because I could not go home, I would have got crucified. Well, we get in the house and as soon as his mom sees me, she knows that something's wrong, like for part 3. Okay, part 3. So like I said, I walked in and she knew that something was wrong with me right away. Because she was like, oh, I have a letter from your boyfriend. And usually I would run up, grab it, read it really quickly. Because I would only get like 1 letter a week. But instead I ran downstairs because her face was fucking melting. So 5 minutes later, she has to come downstairs and help me get dressed into my pajamas because I forgot how to dress myself. I didn't want to be left alone that night, so my friend stayed in the basement with me. So he went and tried to go to sleep. But he couldn't because I was watching Butterfly Effect for 8 hours straight. Like, that was the only thing that could calm me down. But I still don't even know all the freaking words to it, which is weird. Like, he would try to change the video and somehow I end up back to Butterfly Effect. And then he tried to kiss me. So he left the next morning because he had to go to work, which was at like 11 a.m. And I took this tab at 8 p.m. the day before. So I was getting texts like, where are you? You're supposed to be home now. So I had to go home and act normal in front of everybody while I'm still tripping balls. And I also got grounded for coming home late because I could not come home at the right time because I was tripping so hard. And this lasted for about 24 hours.
My best friend always projects her insecurities onto me. Should I break up with her? My best friend and I have known each other for exactly 2 years. We met in college and hit it off right away. We're both Latinas and we come from really big families. I have 2 other sisters and we get along really well. We always hype each other up and have each other's backs. A few months after I started my friendship with my best friend, let's call her Lucia. Lucia started showing some really toxic qualities. Sometimes I think I'm just reading too much into it or overreacting. So you let me know. First of all, she would start talking bad about my sisters in front of me. She would make comments like, wow, your sister's gained weight, or wow, your sister has cellulite. When she first did this, I would just defend my sisters, but then I realized that just made her want to keep talking more trash. So if she ever said anything about my sisters, I wouldn't say anything. At the time our friendship started, I had a really big crush on this guy. He and I went to the same gym and I never had the courage to speak to him, not until my sister convinced me to. I finally spoke to him at the gym and we actually hit it off. We would work out together every now and then and he finally asked me out on a date. The day of our date, my best friend came over to my house, and while I was getting ready, she started saying really weird things. At first she told me that I should wash my hair because it looked oily. I told her my hair was freshly washed. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I could see her reflection and she just rolled her eyes at me. This is when things started clicking. Part 2 is up. My best friend projects her insecurities on me. Should I break up with her? I could see through the mirror that she had rolled her eyes at me. Then she started making other comments about my appearance. Mind you, I'm getting ready for a date. When I showed her the outfit that I was gonna wear, she said it was too revealing and that I would probably scare him off. Wasn't even revealing, it just showed my legs. It was a cute sundress with the cardigan on top. I told her I thought I looked cute. And then she said, "Allá tu amiga." As I'm finishing up my hair and my makeup, she says, "Wow, you're gonna wear that much makeup?" But the way she said it was so aggressive, I actually took off the lipstick I was wearing. Instead, I just put on lip balm. I looked at her and she had a smile on her face. It was like she was happy she finally got to me. The date went really well and he actually turned into my boyfriend a few weeks later. And guess what? My best friend started judging everything about him. The first time she met him, she started saying, "Wow, I think he's balding," which he isn't. And even if he was, I wouldn't care. She also started making comments about him staring at other girls, something I never even noticed that he did, and I would know I'm with him all the time. It's like she was trying to plant all these insecurities in my head. One day, Lucia and my boyfriend and I are in his car. We were heading to the movie theaters when Lucia says, "Wow, you put on way too much perfume. It's giving me a headache." That's when my boyfriend told her that if it bothered her that much, she should just go home. And out of nowhere, Lucia swung her fist at him. She actually tried to attack him. Part 3 is up. My best friend always projects her insecurities on me. Should I break up with her? That's when she started swinging at my boyfriend. Luckily, I yelled at her and she stopped. It's like she was upset at me for yelling at her for trying to hit my boyfriend. That's when my boyfriend kicked her out of the car and I asked him to calm down. I got out of the car with Lucia and asked her to calm down. That's when she told me that I needed to break up with him and that he was clearly abusive. I told her he was just defending me. Then she said, "He doesn't need to defend you. I'm only saying this because I care about you." Then she called herself an Uber and left. My boyfriend and I went to the movie theaters and we had a really nice night. Here's some more examples of her projecting on me. While we were getting ready for a friend's birthday party, she started pointing out some stuff on my body. She said, "Your elbows are really dark. You need to fix that." Another time I decided to get some highlights and she said they looked horrible on me. She said I looked like a JLo wannabe. Luckily I didn't care and I just kept the highlights. Mind you, 2 months later she got the exact same highlights. Now, I know that she cares about me because she does have my back. She'll help me with anything I need, honestly. And I wonder if I'm overreacting, but I don't think so. I just don't know how to tell her that she's toxic. She makes me feel bad. What should I do?
Storytime about why I hate my brother's girlfriend. So a little background information. I was 14 years old and had just started my freshman year of high school. And my brother and his girlfriend were both seniors. And we're going to call his girlfriend Riley. Now, Riley and my brother started dating in the middle of the summer. And you would think since they just started dating and basically just met each other that I wouldn't know her that well. But literally 2 days after they started dating, she started spending every single day at my house. I'm being serious, like she had a whole duffel bag that had basically her closet in it. But that wasn't the problem. So in the summertime, my parents would plan a lot of family activities. And since they were called family activities, his girlfriend wasn't allowed to go. I mean, I think she would have been allowed to go, but she was also really disrespectful to my mom. So after one of our family days, my parents asked my brother if Riley would be joining us for dinner. And he just ignored them and went up to his room. And my room's right next to his, so I could hear everything. And Riley called him like for part 2. Part 2 about why I hate my brother's girlfriend. So like I said, my room was right next to my brother, so I could literally hear everything. And I guess Riley called him and she was complaining about me. She was like, "She's the reason why your mom doesn't like me. I feel like she's jealous of me. She doesn't want us to be together." Which was really weird because I didn't give a fuck about what my brother did. So fast forward, school finally starts, and Riley lived about 20 minutes away from us. So my brother told her that he couldn't go and pick her up for school every day. But obviously I would ride to school with him because we lived together. Anyways, eventually she had a problem with that too. So my brother and I had to start leaving 30 minutes early to get to school so we could pick her up. So the first time that we pick her up, we pull up to her house. And obviously I'm in the front seat and she's just standing there. So my brother rolls down the window and he's like, get in the fucking car, we're gonna be late. And then she literally has the audacity to start arguing with my brother in front of me about why she should get the front seat instead of me. Like for part 3. Part 3 about why I hated my brother's girlfriend. So like I said, once she got in, she started screaming about how she should get the front seat instead of me. So I turn around and I'm like, last time I checked, you've only been here for 2 months. Stay in your fucking lane. And then she starts crying because she's like, oh my god, your sister's so mean to me. Like, I just feel like I should have more respect as his girlfriend. So fast forward to the weekend, my mom said that she needs to have a talk with me. And she's like, honey, I know you may not like your brother's girlfriend, but you have to stop being mean to her. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've only had one conversation with her in the last week, and that was to tell her to stay in her fucking lane. And then I told her about everything going on. So she calls my brother down to ask him if it's true. And my brother was pretty pissed off at me, but he wouldn't lie. So my mom said that she was not allowed over the house anymore, and that he wasn't allowed to go pick her up from school until I got my license. So that just caused more problems between her and my brother, so he broke up with her. And then she started spreading rumors that she broke up with him because there was something weird going on between him and I.